Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I am your co-host, Hugh David.
And I'm your other co-host, Dev Soliger. And on today's show, we're going to be looking at minute 90, where Martin gives up and heads home.
And now
back to the hotel room.
Might as well be at home for him. Joining us all this week has been Graham Smith and Richard Cottrell. Welcome back for your last episode, gentlemen, for this week. How has it been so far?
I think that answers that, really.
Hesitation. Yeah, no. It's definitely been interesting, being flung in the deep end like this.
Still no idea really what's going on, apart from there was a body and a dance. And, the tail end of a dance. So, yeah.
Pretty much all you need for a film. Fantastic. So, Dev, I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, so this is the last of this week's experiment, taking a leaf out of some other Movies by Minute podcast episodes. We have two guests who've still not actually seen the film in its entirety. All they have seen are these 5 minutes. And what choice minutes they have been. So
and continue to be this one, like especially how this one cuts off. I feel that I was very tempted to go and find what happens
next. Work out
next,
what the choice words that followed were.
Yeah.
So so we have Martin. He gets himself some ice, packs it on his face, and then heads back to the hotel room. And I'm not sure I actually mentioned this when we saw him in the hotel room preparing for the reunion, but he has a very, very nice hotel room. Like, it's a full suite hotel room with a separate bedroom and stuff that I don't think I'd really appreciated until I was watching this movie in some detail. But he sat in his bedroom, not in a bathrobe for a change, so that's novel. He is
back to the headset.
Back to the headset. He's watching the TV. He's channel hopping like everybody does when they're sat in a hotel room faced with way more TV channels than they know what to do with. I say everyone. I certainly do it.
What we used to do pre-streaming.
I mean, I definitely did when I was in the US, but that was partially to experience US television like live and raw, as it were, being like, oh, this isn't what the internet tells me it's like. This is genuinely what this is like. But I also feel we should point out this hotel room has a feature I have never seen before in a hotel room, or at least not one outside the really fancy ones. It has a fireplace.
Yes.
It's also with that seriously large wooden bed. It looks like the sort of thing that you'd get in a little B&B or that sort of thing in the UK, scaled up about 5 times.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we do see the outside of the hotel in one scene when he first arrives in town, and it definitely looks like it's more of that kind of boutique hotel, right? It actually, I think, has 2 fireplaces, because there's the one in the bedroom, and I think there's also one in the living room area. So it definitely is that kind of like a private family house that's been converted over into a hotel room is the impression I get.
Yeah, well, the whole point is it plays into the irony of him having lost his own home, right?
Which is used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think a sense of, this is a guy who's going to stay in comfort if he can. It's not like lavish, over-the-top comfort. It's not attention-seeking. But if he can have the space, if he can have, room to decompress, he's gonna pay the premium for that.
Well, so given what we've picked up in the context from the previous 4 minutes in this one, like, he's got a high-risk job that is presumably paying pretty well. And if he's not necessarily going to live to see next week, he might as well spend the money whilst he can, and he might as well enjoy that, sensibly.
Yeah. I mean, and it is sensible, right? It's not frivolous. Yeah. It's just, I'm going to live my life in comfort, not excess, but in comfort, for sure.
Mm-hmm. But even before we get to the hotel room, like, you skipped over this in your summary. He grabs the ice. he then thanks Ken for the pen, which nicely brings us back to how we started this week in these minutes. With like the opening scene of this film, the first thing I'd ever seen, two men strangling each other and then one stabbing the other in the neck with a pen. I'm guessing it's the same pen because that seems to be the sense of humor this film is carrying through.
That is absolutely the case. It is
absolutely
the same
right.
pen. Yes.
But Ken standing there, as we were talking about in the previous episode, his state of inebriation, he hasn't got any clue that he's lent a pen. He's going, "Oh yeah, you're thanking me for good, right?"
Yeah. Okay. Pen, huh? Yeah. No, it is fun, isn't it? The way this whole thing plays out, and the way they sort of it still remembers that it's a comedy. You know, it leaves on that moment. It still kind of remembers that we're here for the occasional punchline and fast talking, the things that Cusack's famous for. But also the payoffs. This is a film that understands the importance of payoffs to things that have happened earlier, and it's which again is not just about action films. It's not just Chekhov's gun. It's also just it's how comedy works, right? Good comedy, it gets funnier the more we kind of build it up. It's like the Fast Show principle of repetition, right? And then in the final episodes of the Fast Show, they change it deliberately for effect because you've to wrong foot you. It's that art of how you do it. So the pen definitely works in that context.
We then get, and again to cycle back something we referred to in an earlier episode, we then get him TV hopping, and you referred to us coming into this late as a bit like us TV hopping and hitting this film and like just finding it in the middle.
And there are some choice clips here. I'm almost surprised there isn't a drug ad in the mix, but I'm wondering if this might actually slightly predate the advent of drug ads on TV in the US. But it's just thing after thing after thing, and they flick by so fast you don't even really absorb them, with the exception of the incredibly loud proclamation of Chihuahua City whilst watching a bunch of chihuahuas racing down a track, which just delights me so much. I actually have some friends here who have recently gotten obsessed with a YouTube channel of pig racing that looks very, very similar to this.
What? That's terrifying.
I know.
I mean, one of the things that I picked up was the Scouse accent just before that, which just reminds me of like tales of oh god, what was the detective show set in Glasgow? Which when they broadcast it in the US, they had to subtitle all the episodes because they couldn't understand the broad Glaswegian accents.
Was that Cracker?
No, because that's in Manchester.
No, it was.
And that's in the 90s. I know what you mean.
The thing is, I could remember a Frankie Boyle joke about it. We'll never hear the word Mordor again. Something Taggart.
Oh god, I watched Taggart for years. Yeah. Taggart was so much fun because there's been a murder. I can't do it. My Scots colleague at work does it so well. There's been a murder. It was the fun thing was it was set in Glasgow, but it wasn't the sort of crimes you expect in Glasgow. It was much more Inspector Morse, Midsummer Murders, wasn't it?
It was like, let's face it, if you go Glaswegian crime, you're going ice cream drug vans. And if people don't know about that, look up the Glasgow ice cream wars. They are a fascinating and horrific time.
Absolutely.
But anyway, back on this, we got a Scouse accent for a second, and then Chihuahua City.
Yes, and then a bunch of cyclists piling up on what I'm assuming is Tour de France, because, I mean, what other cycling races exist in the world?
Or at least they're going to be broadcast in America. And
in the mid-90s, for sure, yeah.
Well, I mean, if there's no American cyclist in it, did it happen?
Is this pre or post Lance Armstrong's heyday?
That's pre, isn't it?
Yeah,
long before.
Yeah, so this is before he's, cycling in the US is kind of a known thing. State of pro cycling in '96. This might be as he's making his rise to the pinnacle of his career.
Yeah, it looks like he first won in
Wasn't that when he was on
99, so this is just before.
Yeah. And it's that thing of, there are so many channels on US TV that there's something for everything, right? Like Chihuahua racing,
and then you can
cycling,
see,
this European
even
sport.
as he's on the phone, he's still skipping food. You can see the reflections of the colours and shapes on the bed.
Well, I mean, this is also the era of public access television as well, and the bizarreness of that world. It's all very, very crazy. But it's what he's doing that's interesting in as well on the bed, in the sense that he is doing something we mentioned in previous episodes for listeners who are following us, that Martin moves at one point away from the headset of the 90s businessman style communications with his mobile to actually using the mobile properly, like a phone, right? It's almost like he's getting more personal, getting closer to the calls, but now he retreats back to the headset, right? He goes back to the hands-free.
Yeah.
I think this also ties in something we mentioned in a couple of episodes ago, where technology sometimes dates this. And to me, that headset these days screams call center headset.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or in the more modern era, the Teams meeting during lockdown headset.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas back then, that was the pinnacle, wasn't it? But also back then, the shielding on those things was so bad. I used to have a friend who ended up with a permanent buzz around here from having worked in a call center in the late 90s before he became a financial programmer. And if he wore a headphone for too long, he'd get the buzz back. Yeah.
But yes, and then we get him calling someone, and the start of what I'm imagining is quite an epic speech.
Interesting. It's interesting that you say that.
We get sort of a fraction of a second of a cut at the end of that. Just a couple of frames of, looks like someone stabbing or smashing the phone there.
Well, I think that's because this is the era, isn't it, of the answer machine that would play the message out loud as it's recording it, instead of recording it and then you'd hit play later. So I get the impression that was it Dr. Oatman? Or
Dr. Oatman.
Oatman. Is sat in the room and realizes that he's about to be,
having actually paused it there. There's what even looks to be a patient in the background.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
she does not look happy.
So yes, it's actually interesting that you kind of talk about this as setting up for a big monologue, because it actually won't be that way. It will just be one sentence that you've missed, and it's very much a kind of like rise and then just an abrupt cliff drop. But it's. Yeah, I think this is kind of, and this plays into what Hugh was saying about the use of the headset and stuff. This is Martin retreating back to who he was at the start of the film much more. This is the regression after facing that challenge and somewhat failing at that challenge, right? Losing Debbie and going back to what he knows he's good at.
I mean, we didn't mention this last episode, but the last words he said to his friend, was it Paul, was, if you see Debbie, tell her I'm sorry.
Yep.
And I think that was a very interesting, those are the words he wants passed on. It's not any kind of attempt to explain himself or anything like that. He's kind of accepted that this is gone, and he's just sorry this is the way it happened.
But it is accepting that it is something he's done.
Which he wasn't doing earlier, as we said, when it was like, how did this man die? The answer wasn't, I killed him. The answer was, oh, he was a hitman who was sent after me, or there's a contract out.
And also that this isn't me, or whatever the line was.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Oatman is, as you guys will have guessed from what gets said, is obviously his therapist, and we've talked a lot in previous episodes about the whole business of a hitman having a therapist, the notion of therapy in American films at this time and thrillers. And I just feel like this is actually quite interesting to see Martin lying through his teeth once again. He's gone from being honest to lying through his teeth because he's sitting there going, hey, it's going fine. It's all good. And you just think, really, Martin, this is your response to what's just happened? You're just going to give up on all of it? You know, he really is just thinking, fine, I can't make this work. My life follows me, and therefore I will need to give, go back to it in order to make sure that, you know, it's kept away from his past, from Debbie and everything else. And I like that. I find that really interesting. I find that kind of, it's a nice resolution, isn't it? To kind of the emotional arc of any film in which you have a man of violence attempting to re-enter society, as opposed to the historical tradition going back to Greek theatre of the hero not being allowed back in. You know, I mean, it's like The Searchers with John Ford, right? You know, it's this whole thing of the person who does the violence is on behalf of defending society is not permitted back in, because that violence, the ability to commit that violence successfully, removes you from the bounds of civilization, right? And in that sense, this film is the crashing of the rom-com and the action film has made this film all about him attempting to get back into his life that he left behind, and at this point he seems to have decided to give up on that.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Yes,
in a way, yeah. With
yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
There's a very Fordian element to this.
Yeah,
which is cool. But I also like the way that he goes about it as well. The way he goes about telling Oatman, it's just lie after lie after lie. But we know from the rest of the film that Oatman couldn't give a shit. And this is the moment Oatman's been waiting for, right? He's being freed of this hostage situation.
Yeah, and even Oatman's not happy with it, as we will find out, or as you can somewhat infer from the very last frame of the minute, if you manage to pause it there. Yeah.
I mean, also just like, you know, I get this isn't the point, but it's all this is an interesting one for patient confidentiality of whatever they're saying to the answering machine is being played to anyone who happens to be in the room at the right time.
Yes, and I suspect that this is one of those things of he's also kind of reacting with the, oh shit, I didn't actually mute the thing, and I can't figure out the technology in the heat of the moment kind of frustration. It's not just expressed directly at Martin, but also somewhat at himself for not being prepared the way he should be as a professional.
I'm also going to guess that the whole take a deep breath and realize, which is like when this minute cuts off, I'm guessing that's something that Oatman said before to him.
Yes.
And like,
yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Spot on. Yeah. Brings it right back round again.
It's almost like I know the rhythms of comedy well enough to see what they're doing, even if I didn't get the setup to the joke. Or in fact, the punchline.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It is in that sense. Yeah, very much so. I mean, this is 1997, so you know, in the years since, you know, if the formula wasn't already present beforehand, it's definitely, you know, it makes complete sense for you to be able to do that. And that's one of the joys of having this run of episodes this week, is you guys being dropped straight in and us being able to see you guys pull out the formulae, the genre parameters, the kind of the essence of what makes these films fit the genres that they're aiming for.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and I mean, to fully loop the callbacks, we mentioned at the very start that the pen was a callback to the start of our week's worth of episodes, with the pen appearing there. So yes, this does, like, we're fairly late in the film, is my understanding. Like, yes. we're almost this. If this isn't the climactic scene, this is the kind of false climax before we get to the actual finale.
Spot on. Yeah, exactly.
Then
the first false.
It feels like it's tying everything together in a way where, like, if the next shot was, you know, he says something and hits a train station and leaves, that would be kind of your melancholy, sad ending, and you could see that playing out fully.
Exactly. In a way that would never happen in an American movie, or an American mainstream movie.
Yeah,
like this,
it's sort of going, here are all the plot threads that you've hopefully picked up on, and just pulling them together and going, and now we're hopefully going to resolve them in the bits we're not going to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else for this minute?
I'm good. I think we've covered everything.
All right.
Nothing else from me.
Okay.
This was minute 90 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers and co-producers, myself, Dev, and my buddy, Hugh.
Today's guests and our guests all this week have been Richard Cottrell and Graham Smith, who have been great sports for putting up with us and trying to talk about a film that they haven't actually seen. This is the sound of us firing you. You can find us at all good podcasts. Indeed.
We're free! Freedom!
You can find us at all good podcast players, including the one that you're listening to us on, as well as YouTube, X, and Spotify, all at Debi Radio, as well as our website, debiradio.com. And in all of those cases, the handle is spelled DEBI Radio, just like in the film.
You can also talk with us on the Facebook listeners group. That is Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment, it was a feeling.